Unfortunately, we still have problems with our Wi-Fi system here, and
No.
we're okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome the press and Keith to this meeting. Thank you. First of all, declarations of interest. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. A non-pecuniary interest in item 14, as my wife is an employee of the Five Islands School.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. If transport emerges on the agenda, then I declare an coordinator of FRIST a campaign group.
Thank you. Item 2, Councillor Legg.
Also interested in item 14, as my wife is also employee of the Five Islands School.
Thank you. Right, item 2 on our agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting, to confirm as a record the draft minutes of the meeting of the Council of the Isles of Scilly held on the 11th of September 2018. Any comments on those minutes, please? Councillor Sims.
I propose we accept them as a true record.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Molson. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? The minutes are confirmed. Item 3, Chairman's announcements. I just have one item to mention. Obviously, the council is very disappointed with the news that Nike Engineering is to close, and obviously that it's very important for the islands to have an engineering capacity. So I just really wanted to advise you that the officers are in discussions with key stakeholders, trying to find a long-term viable solution. Obviously, it's not technically a council problem at the moment. However, you know, it's very important that we have this engineering facility, and if we cannot get stakeholders to pick it up and run again, then we may have to step in for the sake of the community and deal with it. But I just wanted you to rest assured that we are watching this situation and trying to resolve it. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is questions understanding order 14. I have none. Item 5, to consider reports from committees. Page 11. Councillor Mumford.
Yes, I'd like to present the minutes of the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, which was held on the 18th of September. If there are any questions, perhaps they could direct their questions to Councillor Marcus, as I was unwell and I was unable to take the meeting. Are there any questions? If it's in order, Chairman, could I just make a little statement about the Scrutiny meeting?
You may. Thank you.
The Scrutiny Committee is having a problem getting a quorum at the moment, and I've had to move another meeting to later on. I would like to discuss this problem with DPP in the near future, but in the meantime, if there is any member of the Scrutiny Committee that would like to step down and let someone else come on who can actually find the time to attend, I think that's a thought that we could think about. And I realise everyone has commitments, but we do need to have more people to attend scrutiny so we can function better in the future. Perhaps members would like to think about this before the meeting in November, full council meeting in November.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. I would also like to comment from the chair that I sat in on that particular meeting, and I agree with everything that Councillor Mumford has said. And we need to have a properly functioning scrutiny committee, and sadly the numbers were very short. We only had one or two the councillors putting questions on the day, and we really need a more robust situation with our scrutiny, and I hope that we can work together to get this sorted in the very near future. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to preempt any future discussion, but I do think perhaps we need to revisit, with only 16 of us, the issue that we exclude lead members from the scrutiny committee. It could be that a lead member would just have extra training and awareness of when they needed to exclude themselves, and that might give us a bigger pool. But I'm very sympathetic to the Chairman of Scrutiny's wish to have a fully functioning and robust committee.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
I think actually I'd have to look this up again. In the terms of reference, I think actually the only lead member that is excluded at the moment is the lead member for children, plus the chairman and vice chairman. And as you say, I think we need to discuss this at DPP, but if we could get something before the November committee, perhaps I could have a discussion with the chair and vice chair before then, see what we could bring to the meeting in November.
Certainly, thank you. Councillor Sims.
Firstly, I'd like to endorse all the previous comments on this, and related really, when the leader and deputy leader of Cornwall Council came over, Adam Painter and Julian German, there were very few members turned up to meet them, and I thought that was quite disappointing and quite a poor show. And congratulations to the off-island council who actually did make it over. I thought that was really good, even if some of them got there a little bit late because of boating. However, the effort was made. I think the council now has an issue with some members with attendance. I won't say anything further than that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think we need a proposer for the minutes.
Yeah, I've
Got a bit sidelined.
No,
sorry.
I'm just coming to that, but I think Councillor Barclay wanted to say something.
Yes, Chairman. Under the work item on the work plan, SC 3018, I did mention that the work plan looked very full, and I do believe more consideration should be given in advance to really choosing projects or work that will make a significant difference to the work of the council as a whole. And just on a lighter point, the last sentence, she felt that the work plan was very full and would benefit from having less projects, but looked at in more detail. I'd like to say that should be fewer projects.
So, Councillor Mumford.
Just a quick note on that. We are having an annual review of scrutiny, and I think that all these problems will come to light, and because we really want to have a more robust committee.
Thank you. So could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Sims, and seconder, Councillor Barclay, for the adoption of these minutes. All those in favour? Any against? Sorry, Councillor Grottick.
I'm sorry to be pedantic, but I think we're actually receiving draft minutes for information, are we not? I don't know whether we actually need that wording encompassed in your proposal.
So if I can come in, I don't think it much matters, so long as you recognise that approving minutes falls to the next scrutiny.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the next item is item 6, to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 7 is members' updates. Do we have any members' updates, please? Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just mention to start with that I didn't put forward a lead member for finance report for this committee because it's barely 3 weeks, I think around 3 weeks since our last committee. Since the finance issues were deferred from the last committee, the situation remains as with my last lead member report. I would just like to add that we were very pleased to welcome members of the local enterprise board to the Isles of Scilly last week. They actually came on a beautiful day this time, so they weren't delayed. At least last time when they were delayed, they did have a first-hand look at our transport challenges, which might have been a bit useful. This time we had a very full working day. We also had a business breakfast, and all in all, it was a very productive and useful day. So thank you to the members that supported that. Sufficient liaison has been also carried out with members regarding my finance role between last council and this. Thank you.
Councillor Berkeley.
Chairman, regarding the visit by the LEP board, as a member, this was only announced very much last minute in my experience. And I would just like to hear what the level of council members' involvement in this important visit was. A business breakfast is one thing, but what about council members' involvement and your own especially?
As I share your concerns, Councillor Berkeley, I think our only member involvement is our vice chair who sits on the LEP. As far as I'm aware, there was no other member involvement. Councillor Mumford.
I did actually get an agenda for the LEP meeting, and what I didn't realise was that actually the public can attend, which I didn't realise that you could attend a LEP meeting.
Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Yes, I believe this is a recent innovation and one I intend clarifying for members. I would point out that until absolutely now, it has not been possible for members of the public or indeed elected members to attend LEP meetings. They have been closed board meetings, and the board meeting actually started at 10 o'clock and went on right the way through the day. So there was very little time for engagement between the LEP and council. I've actually spoken to the LEP chair and to Adam Painter, who sits on the board for Cornwall Council. I think if it was possible to have a fuller engagement meeting between members of council and the LEP, it would be extremely useful. That said, most of the members of LEP, unfortunately, or possibly because of the fact that they are very busy and involved people, it would be quite a diary challenge to get together, but possibly we could give this some thought in the future. I'll certainly do everything I can, and I'm very grateful for everyone's support and wish to engage.
Councillor Sims.
Lead member update from place. Well, first of all, I'm going to bang on about the water again. I know people may be getting fed up with this, but we still potentially have an issue with water. We had, you may well have noticed, we had quite a lot of rain a weekend or so ago, but that will take a number of weeks to get into the aquifer. So if we had critical levels in August, then presumably we still have critical levels now. However, we've had some recent figures which compare last year with this year, which is a much more effective way of doing it at the moment, because obviously numbers will drop. I was really, really pleased to see a 22% drop on last year in the middle of August. It's tailed up a bit then, but we're still using 6% less than we were using last year. And my alarm's going off. So basically, keep going with it, really. Everybody's done a really, really good job, but we just don't get complacent and keep going. And there are some additional water-saving bits of kit available from the one-stop shop and lifelong learning. I think shower timers and some instructions, and so there are other things as well, which nature of which escape me. So keep up with that. Regarding off-island mixed waste recycling, which is come in now. Maybe an off-island could give me some more input on this, because I've not actually been on the ground over there. But I've been told there's no major snags. There have been some queries, but the council hasn't been inundated. Off-island waste managers, contractors have sent dry mix recycling to St Mary's. A visual inspection of quality suggests that all's good. The new collection round, this is the St Mary's. The new collection round is planning to include mixed waste recycling on St Mary's will start in November. The new vehicle is being tested, and new route planning is progressing. So although some changes to the original plans are going to be required, so I think that's all going quite well. And from Nicola's department, our housing stock condition survey has gone out to tender. This is needed to inform our repair and maintenance and capital programs moving forward. And we've started to receive applications for properties to be licensed through the revised homes in multiple occupation regulations, which came into effect yesterday. So hopefully everybody's up to scratch on that, though I fear perhaps they won't be. And in terms of food safety interventions, the majority of food premises are doing well, with a significant number obtaining the 5-star rating. And also the council's health and safety advisory group, HASAG, HASAG, is now reformed and keen to improve the health and safety management of council services. I believe Robert, Chair of the Council, attended the first meeting. Now, this is probably worth thinking about. Previously, we had a health and safety, I believe it was champion on the council. I did it for the first year I was on, and actually it sounds incredibly dull, but the meetings are quite useful and informative, and it may well be worth considering having another councillor to do that, because I think probably Robert's got other things to do. And also there was an equality and diversity champion, which I think has gone by the wayside, which was Andy Guy, which I thought was perfect. But I think perhaps we could introduce that as well. And finally, I would like to reiterate Robert's comments regarding Nike. It's obviously a personal issue for me, because I have a big vehicle, and it's very difficult to get big vehicles sorted out over here, but there's a lot of big vehicles over here. And if we lose that engineering facility, my view, it's a nail in the lid of the coffee. And it's very, very important that we have that facility on the islands.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. I just come back on that point. I did attend the HASAG, they call it the Health and Safety Advisory Group meeting, and I did find it extremely interesting. And I thought that it was chaired by Mike Coates, and I thought that the content of their work was extremely good, and I found it very, very useful. I will attend further meetings. However, if any of you members are busting to get on that, I would obviously appreciate someone to come forward in view of my workload. However, you know, if you do wish to do that, please advise me in due course. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make no excuses for reporting again on Park House. At our last meeting, I mentioned that CQC had recently been a few days before our meeting. Yesterday, I had the chance to read the report, which I'm not quite sure. Apparently, it hasn't been published, but it is extant. It is here. As I inferred last time, the CQC, which, as I think most members know, visit unannounced on a 2-yearly cycle. They come for 3 days and make a very thorough report. It runs to 20 pages, in fact. But they look at 5 areas. Is the service safe? Is it effective? Is it caring? Is it responsive? And is it well led? And I'm obviously very pleased to report that we achieved good on all points. And it really comes over to me how effective we can be in these islands when we get the right people in the right places, because we all know it was in a very bad place more than a year ago now, but we've been extremely lucky to fill the managerial role, and Claudia came out extremely well. In fact, as I said at the last meeting, she actually said she enjoyed the examination, which I think shows the quality that we have there, and how important it is for us all to get behind Park House 100% and support it. There's still some feeling that it is vulnerable. And I think that it's so important in this day and age that we show what sort of community we are by looking after people towards the end of their lives. We know that it was built as a residential home. It's now functioning as a care home. So there are obviously difficulties in the fabric. But having understood that, I think it's so it's such an illustration of what can be done when you get the right people in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims? No, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to go back to Councillor Sims, Lead Member for Place, and ask a couple of questions. Firstly was on water situation, whether we can actually have a paper comparing water use over perhaps the past 5 years to look at trends, particularly with obviously the critical situation we've been in this year. So really an assessment of the kind of the usage and also the costings as well.
Well, I'm sure the figures are available. I'm not altogether clear what the utility of that would be, but yeah, I'm sure the figures are there.
Well, obviously comparing 1 year on another can be a snapshot, so it's looking at trends really. That's what I was interested in.
I think Chairman will have to sort of assess actually what information that we have got historically, whether it goes back 5 years. So we're obviously not obliged to keep necessarily that sort of information, so we would need to check.
Okay, as much as we could. And then the second point was just on file and recycling. Just really sort of anecdotal evidence of it. It seems to be taken up quite well. People seem to be enthusiastic. I'm sure a little bit of support wouldn't go amiss to help people increase their recycling rates and the uptake, but you know, I'd say generally well received.
Well, I think the assumption was, a quite reasonable assumption made, was that it worked very well with the pilot scheme at Telegraph, and the off-islanders are just as capable of managing their refuge as the people on St Mary's, and any queries and questions will can be addressed at the public meetings, which are coming up fairly soon. So I will probably go attend the public meetings on that basis. It might be me making noise on the switch off.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, Councillor Williams, please.
I was going to provide my update, Chairman. So I don't know if anyone had any further questions.
Councillor Mumford.
I'd just like to go back to the LEP, if I may. Councillor Grottick sent an email to us all about the meeting, which was very good, but I would like to have seen that actually come to full council so the public could see what she said as well. Because I think a lot of us are a little bit in the dark about LEP, and it was very interesting to go to the business breakfast, I must say. And I think the public would like to know a little bit more about it as well. I just wondered in future, if there was a LEP update, could it come to full council in an update?
Thank you, Councillor Grottick.
I'd be very happy to do that. As I've just explained, I think that now the process of information being able to be more freely available to the public is happening now. So if I just get some clarification from the chair and the administration officer about what is and isn't appropriate, then certainly I'll comply with your wishes.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Since our last meeting, the school have had an interim Ofsted visit. The results yet aren't yet in the public domain, but as and when they become so, I will share them with members. In addition
Joel,
to that,
could you switch mics? I think yours is causing the noise.
Yeah. Does it? Shall I swap? Got three now. Can you hear me now? In addition to that, a fortnight ago or so I attended the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, which is made up of partners including Cornwall Council and our local council here. And some of the main discussion points were around safeguarding processes for schools in Cornwall and Scilly, and looking at key themes, shared concerns and opportunities for developing some of those processes. Monitoring the business plan, including areas and priorities which aren't developing as quickly as others. And I think it's fair to say that priorities in Cornwall are also priorities on Scilly, so that was very relevant. We discussed the proposed Devon and Cornwall Police and Dorset Police merger, but I think that's moved on even in that last fortnight. So again, it's an area just worth watching. And we've discussed in detail some of the issues around financial constraints for various partners. So colleagues from the police schools, colleges, local authorities were able to discuss how tightly the elastic band is currently being stretched in light of this sort of current budget setting process. And we also discussed the Truth Project, which is a national inquiry into historic sexual abuse, and the fact there's sessions taking place in Cornwall and how potentially that can be extended to Scilly in case there are any victims over here who would like to participate in that. So they were the main discussion points from that meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Sims.
Just one thing which is not in my remit at all, really, and I was hoping Councillor Adams would be here. But my understanding is the integration of Dorset, Cornwall and Devon, the police, has fallen through. I don't know if anybody here knows, but I imagine that would just be business as usual and no real implications for us.
Can I
Councillor Molson.
Yeah, it hasn't actually fallen through yet, but the Police and Crime Commissioner has come out on the side against it at the moment. So it's still actually on the table. However, Alison Hernandez has publicly stated that she has come off the fence and said that she is not for it anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
Could I just make one point about the lead members' updates? Is there a problem in having the updates in paper form in here? Because would be nice to be able to read them before we actually come to the meeting. I just wondered whether the lead members have got a problem in putting the papers in to council. I know they have to be there. I'm not quite sure. Is it 5 working days or something before? It's just my thought that I would prefer it in a paper form.
I do agree with you, Councillor Mumford. However, I would say that, as pointed out by the Vice Chair recently, we've had a very, very quick turnaround between the last meeting and this meeting. And I think, there's not been a lot of issues that have happened in that time to report on. That's the only thing I would say about it. However, it would be very appropriate for lead members to submit written reports, please, in future meetings if they possibly can. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
In response to that, I would just like to say that the CQC came a day or two before our last meeting, and I read the report yesterday. So, I just feel that it's incumbent upon lead members to keep this meeting, this council up to date, and to have to put in a report a week beforehand, rather than negates that feeling.
Yeah, I do understand. So hopefully we'll be sorting out our dates for meetings in due course as well, which will mitigate some of these circumstances. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief update from AONB regarding our paper on balloons and sky lantern releases that we passed last time. And I said I would take the issue up with AONB partners on Scilly. I've put that forward to the next AONB meeting, which is next week, suggesting that other landowners on Scilly would like to adopt a similar principle. And the evidence so far is looking positive on that front, so I shall take that forward. I just also had a brief question for Councillor Barclay regarding Smart Islands and the status of the business support and EV programme, please.
Yes, I did. I was going to ask whether members got the briefing notes which were sent out. I sent a covering note. Was there any particular question Councillor Smith wanted to ask?
So I was just ready for you to just expand on sort of timescales and that sort of thing, really.
I don't know that I can off the cuff. I have been meeting with the project manager and I sort of keep up to date. It seems to be going well in line. I don't know if Nicola can fill in on actual dates.
So for the business energy efficiency scheme, so proposals that want to come forward through that process, the expressions of interest is open now. So if people are interested seeking grant towards renewable or energy efficiency measures. Those expressions of interest can be sent through to the council at this stage. I think it's through Rob Roder's email account. I think it's on there, but the contact is Rob Roder at scilly.gov.uk. So businesses have been informed and are encouraged to make their expressions of interest at this time. Does that help?
Thank you. Do we have anything further under members' updates, please? Councillor Barclay, would you like to cancel your microphone? Thank you. Just one item. The next item is item 8, urgent items, of which I don't really have any, except to mention that our MP, Derek Thomas, was supposed to be here on Scilly today, and as with some of our officers from Cornwall Council were unable to get here, he has rescheduled for next Monday. So if any of you or you know of any members of the community that had meetings arranged with him today, you might just pass on the word that he will hopefully be here on Monday coming. Thank you. Item 9 on our agenda is the planning protocol 2018, starting on your page 21. I'd like to hand over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a report for members to understand and agree the updated version of the planning protocol. This document seeks to provide clarity to anyone involved in the planning process as to standards and conduct of officers and members when processing and determining planning applications. This is an update to the planning protocol that was last updated in 2015 and reflects the changes to the committee structures at the council, which took place in 2017. So, any questions?
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this I welcome this paper. It clarifies how it's a good update on the planning protocol and how lead members and members should understand and follow the planning system. One question I had was on paragraph 18, which is page 7 of the protocol. That paragraph kind of assumes that the lead member for planning will pressurise an officer for a decision in a pre-meeting. Can we think of some better words to kind of?
I think if members are happy with delegating that, tweaking that paragraph so the message is the same, but I guess the language is less accusatory.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, but it was just literally the language reflected. You would have previously said the chairman and vice chairman of planning committee will not be pressurised, so that the members of the public are clear. So it's literally the wording has changed to lead member. So there was no.
So just think that needs a little bit of a rewrite. But apart from that, I would propose a recommendation with that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I'm happy to second it. I just wanted to say it's a very good piece of work, and with a little bit of tweaking, it could actually be part of a standards tutorial. Very, very good. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, endorses a very good piece of work. Just like to pick up on member training, section 5. I mean, clearly this is absolutely critical to the workings of the planning committee. I just wonder whether there should be some sort of timescale on when members should have refresher courses. Certainly include myself on that. It's good to keep up to date and really just think about regular training and ensuring also that members have completed that training, of course, because it is very important. And I also just wanted to pick up on section 14, referrals to either full council or delegated powers. I would actually propose that this has an additional section in there in terms of when application should go to full council, and that if there's been an application that's been previously deferred or refused, I would suggest that that's contentious enough to bring it to full council. And actually, that should be another category in there. And I also feel that there's something lacking perhaps in the point 2 around major developments clearly should come to full council, but I guess major developments depends a bit on the scale of the place. A major development on St Mary's is a different major development to St Martin's, St Agnes, Briar. So I just wondered if we could sort of work on that perhaps.
Yeah, if I can just come back on that. Yeah, so major development is not, we don't get major development particularly here on Scilly, but where it is the construction of something new, even if it's just a single dwelling, that those kinds of applications we do bring automatically to full council. It's not, it isn't, there is no specific threshold other than calling them major. But I don't think I can add anything.
I think, Chairman, I think, you know, an element of discretion, I think, would be important here, because obviously we need to contextualise what we mean by major development, particularly obviously in the context of the Isles of Scilly. So my view would be that it would be the officers that in the first instance would actually make that assessment and judgment as to whether or not we feel a particular application is contentious, even though it might fall out of the specific definition of major development as specified by the government, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I've just been surprised at a couple of applications recently that haven't gone straight to full council that have needed to be called in, and that has surprised me somewhat at the nature of those applications.
Okay, well, we have a recommendation. Do we have an amendment to that recommendation, or are you satisfied we take the recommendation as it stands? Councillor Marcus.
The amendment to delegate rewriting paragraph 18 to the officers, but no other amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Well, the amendment I would propose then is also to paragraph 12 regarding a sort of timescale on member training, some sort of quantification there, and also around the issues I just raised around paragraph 34. Perhaps that should be delegated to discussions between lead member for planning and the senior manager.
Chairman, just a point actually on the member training, it would be better actually to fall out of the protocol, because obviously we'll need an element of flexibility year on year, particularly in terms of member training, because obviously it depends on where you are in terms of the kind of council committee cycle with elections. So what we might allude to in here is that we will have a programme of member training, but that member training will sit outside of this particular document.
So are we happy with the recommendation with those amendments? Can I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose that.
Councillor Smith and a seconder. Councillor Mumford. All in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. So item 10 on the agenda is a consultation responses on the draft Isles of Scilly local plan, public consultation 2015 to 2030, including the proposed changes, starting on your page 41. Again, that's over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report for members to understand the nature and of the consultation responses and the representations to the public consultation of the draft plan, which took place between March and May this year. Officers have drafted responses to the comments made, which are appended to the report, and have been working on the amendments to the local plan. This report also sets out some of the more strategic changes that officers are recommending or made to the plan. We intend to have a local plan working group with members coming up shortly to run through the details of those. We've had a number of meetings with organisations and statutory consultees and have commenced some additional pieces of work, including things like an infrastructure report, an update on the local housing need calculation, which we did go through with members in a working group. We've done a piece of work on the historic environment assessment on one of the proposed housing allocations, and we've also sought to engage with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on our approach to housing delivery. Since the local plan process commenced, there have been a number of changes nationally, including most recently an updated national planning policy framework. as well as case law and requiring appropriate assessments for the habitat regulations of the draft plan. So a full habitat regs assessment will be carried out and its outcomes fed back into the local plan. So that's just a brief overview of what's in the report. So if they've got any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa, please? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a question on paragraph 30, page 49. The infrastructure capacity topic paper, does the completion of that, is the local plan reliant on that being completed?
Chairman, I think the importance actually of the infrastructure plan is when we probably move into the examination. And so it's background information to ensure that actually the proposals and plans actually for infrastructure improvements actually align to sustainable growth. So it's not necessary to have that document because we know effectively what some of those policies and plans and investments will be. So it's important to have that as a background document, but we can still progress with the next stage of the local plan.
Thank you. I think clearly it's a very welcome addition and very necessary. I was also just going to ask on paragraph 22. Yeah, essentially whether that piece of the impact survey should actually be carried out. I wasn't quite clear whether that was sort of advisory or the intention was to carry that out.
Chairman, again, we have had actually some fairly lengthy discussions both with Natural England and the RSPB. I think the point that we've made as officers is that any background work has to be proportionate to the local plan. So in this instance, most of the growth will actually be needs-led as opposed to market demand-led. So if you're actually looking at the issues around population decline since 2008, actually the impacts in terms of recreation are actually going to be fairly minimal. So I think my view is that actually that's slightly over the top in terms of the context and the growth that's being planned for this local plan.
And just since that report was written, we have had a teleconference with Natural England who have actually agreed with us to say, yeah, we agree that that is a disproportionate thing. Our expectations were too high, and we agree. That's not required.
And the one thing I would say is that the local plan is bound by the is going through a sustainable appraisal, including habitat regulations assessment as well. So that will actually pick up in terms of some of the direct and indirect consequences to the natural environment.
Yeah, thank you. That's good for clarification. And, you know, I think the habitat regulations sort of sieve, if you like, is very helpful there because it's a very good, robust process. Just to pick up on the issue of the numbers of affordable homes being proposed, I'm going to propose that we actually stick to the 105 figure because as laid out clearly in the report, in fact, the local plan is reviewed after 5 years anyway. So to me, that the 105 is evidenced and it seems a sensible target, and I wouldn't actually support going to the 120 and stick with the 105 to be reviewed after 5 years.
Councillor Molson.
Yeah, just a couple of contextual comments is that I actually disagree with Councillor Smith. I think that we ought to go for the 120 so that it doesn't tie our hands as far as the future is concerned and builds in eminent flexibility immediately. If the next comment that I'm going to make comes to fruition, I understand that there is a potentiality that the government is likely to make announcements as far as building affordable homes, and money's available for that within the very near future. So if that does come to fruition, we may be able to access it, we may not. However, if we tie ourselves at 105, we may not be able to go back because that is written in tablets of stone for the next 5 years. I would support the target increase to 120.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Yes, I think I would be prepared to second Councillor Molson's proposal, but purely on the basis that a figure of 120 doesn't negate any of the proposals having to go through the rigorous planning proposals. But what I would say is every time I read a housing report and it mentions affordable housing, especially for the Isles of Scilly, my heart sinks, because what is affordable for most of the people on their income levels on the islands is absolutely not affordable in terms of buying your own house. Therefore, I would like to prioritise and hope that we could move forward with building some units. Social housing for rent is, I think, the way forward for most of our young people. And I would like to really hope that the talking will stop soon and we could actually start putting some bricks on the ground and actually build some more social housing. And I'm hopeful that the Local Enterprise Board may be one of the avenues to which we look for support. But obviously, we shouldn't rule out any avenues of support, and it's going to be funding that's going to be so very difficult, because every time we try for some of these fundings, it seems to me, we fall against the best value. With our freight implications especially, we can't fulfil most of the criteria for what is defined as best value. But I know that Nicholas Stinson is working very hard to look at all things like modular housing, building to first fix. And I even saw a report the other day that suggested we could use shipping containers. And some of them, I have to say, did look pretty stunning. So I hope that we're going to start moving forward on this really soon. So I'm happy for the meanwhile to propose that recommendation that Councillor Molson proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Before we go into the numbers, can I just ask for clarification on paragraph 13? That means that all the housing allocations, am I right in thinking that there'll be open market within the housing allocations and anything outside the housing allocations will be local, will have conditions attached to them?
That's correct. So that's the intention, and that's what that paragraph is suggesting, yeah. That
everything within the, not all houses within the allocations will be open market. There will be some conditions on those houses as well.
No, it means the housing allocations will be the sites that we want to develop and will permit open market on. Sites outside that, it will be the current specific local need only.
Thank you. I would go for the 105 houses myself. I think the 120, if this government does make an announcement, the chances are that money will be taken from somewhere else, so it's not going to be new money, and I can't see how that they will actually deliver anything of any value, to be honest, because they're not delivering anything of any value at the moment, but that's my personal opinion. So I would propose the 105 number rather than 120, because we are going to review it in 5 years. An extra 15 houses over those 5 years is not going to make a massive amount of difference.
I'd just like to ask Nicholas Stinson to comment, please.
I think deliverability, as you say, is difficult here. And there's two funds that we're looking into at the moment, so it might just help members understand what's achievable. So there's a community housing fund which will suit us. That's a fund that's been released already. And that is around enabling communities, local community groups, to set up community land trusts to deliver on self and custom build sites primarily, but also community groups to come forward. And there's a revenue stream that we'll be bidding into over the next few months that will give us some capacity to work with the community, particularly those on our self and custom build register, of which there are 29 at the moment, to see how we can help them and facilitate them to build their own homes. And the second fund, which is a social housing fund, which Councillor Wilson alluded to, is now available. It was announced last week. The minimum threshold for delivery is an additionality of 1,000 homes. So it makes it quite difficult for us to be part of that. But what we're looking into is the possibility of being part of a consortium bid that's between Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So it might be possible to join that on the coattails, if you like, of a wider consortium. So we're exploring that at the moment, and that would give the possibility of grant to allow affordable or social homes to be built on the island. So we're exploring both those avenues at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
There was one bit that concerned me a little, not hugely though. Our demographic predictions predict negative population growth, and obviously there's a little piece in it about how that potentially could impact on us in terms of accessing funding. hopefully we will be able to get around that by pointing out, well, this place is just frankly a little bit weird, and we perhaps need some sort of dispensation on this. I mean, I imagine that would be in hand. I just wanted a little bit of reassurance on that.
Well, Chairman, all I'd say is actually the whole growth strategy, the civil growth strategy in the local plan is actually to address some of those actually fundamental issues because of not just the declining population, but also the demographic imbalance as well. Because obviously the predictions are that by 2030, 54%, only 54% of the population will be of working age. And clearly that will put all sorts of economic pressures and social pressures actually on the community. So the very thrust of the vision and objectives and aims of the local plan is actually to address those fundamental issues.
I am aware of that, but that's our local plan. I'm just talking about what the powers that be outside of the Isles of Scilly may take a view on the negative demographic, and it possibly could it disadvantage us, and would it be subject to basically negotiation on our part?
Certainly in terms of funding, we have to put the case together about why growth is important to this island and about the sustainability of the island into the future. The economic sustainability of the island goes hand in hand with housing growth, I think. And that's what the local plan is portraying, I think, through its policies, through its enabling policies, allowing the community to thrive moving forward. So I think the enabling policies in the plan support the decisions that we're making around funding and support our case around the need to support the destination management plan and the local plan in ensuring the sustainability islands moving forward. So we're not managing decline, we're encouraging growth.
Thank you. I think the other thing I would say that there's a number of salutary points made in this document and in the local plan itself, which hopefully will make some members of our community who are very reluctant to accept that we need more houses and things sort of will, in a sense, wake up and smell the coffee.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Well, yeah, the conversation that just took place was almost the point I was going to raise. I don't think the argument yet has been made to convince the vast majority of the community about what the local plan is aiming to achieve. And I think if any good comes out of the issues we've currently got with the engineering works and its vulnerability, perhaps that argument can be reinforced that, as far as I understand, the recruitment and retention of staff at that engineering facility is partly based on issues to do with housing. And although I don't like the term growth, I prefer community sustainability and comments like that. I think perhaps we need to do more as members and officers to reinforce that we're not building for building's sake, we're building for this generation, the next generation, and the generation after that. And at the moment, I don't think that argument is getting through as well as it possibly could.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd just like to say at the walk-in sessions that this argument was made again and again. It's whether people are listening. People only listen when it's apparent to them and on their actually relevant to their lives. So we can say all the stuff that we say, and we've been saying it for quite a while with all the drop-in sessions. But you've got the garage now. You've had the nursery closing as well. This is all shockwaves of ripples of not having enough houses here and not having a sustainable community here. So I don't know how many more times you can say, well, we've just got to keep on saying it. So
thank you. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Williams' comment about perhaps a lack of clarity within the local communities, what the local plan is actually for, and that's borne out by some of the questions which have been answered in this document. I spent 4 hours yesterday reading all the way through it. In fact, it highlights the, I wouldn't say ignorance, but lack of knowledge about what the local plan is actually for. And for instance, just 2 items that cropped up. One was the amount of car parking on St Mary's, which is not part of the local, it's not a planning issue. And similarly, cruise ships. I mean, that's not, they don't require planning permission anyway. So the clarity issue is, as Councillor Williams says, quite important.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to second Councillor Marcus's proposal on accepting the 105 affordable homes figure. And just to be absolutely consistent with the draft local plan, it should be up to 105 affordable homes, because that's what it says in the local plan. I would also propose adopting recommendation 2 as well. May I also very briefly just ask, Nicholas Denson, I think the information on the delivery mechanisms and the funding mechanisms for housing is really interesting. And could we have a paper to council to outline those proposals, please?
Scheduled for next month.
Councillor Sims.
I would be quite opposed really to having up to in it, because it's just restricted. I would be much happier within the region of, then we don't have to amend it later on if it does go up. So get rid of up to and put in the region of, if that's acceptable.
Right, we have two proposals on the table, so I intend to take them one at a time. The first is that proposed by Councillor Marcus and seconded by Councillor Smith, that we stick with the 105, and if you're all in agreement, that we say in the region of 105. So first of all, could we please have a vote on that? How many are supporting that? I think that's carried, so we don't need to take the vote on 120. Would you like it recorded?
Well, that's the one that came first.
Sorry? Well, okay, I'll take them again then. Can I take the first proposal? Well, I'll take the first proposal then for 120 houses, proposed by Councillor Molson, seconded by Councillor Grottick. All those in favour of that proposal, please? Of two. Thank you. So the second proposal we've already voted on is carried. Thank you. Right, the next item on our agenda is number 11.
Did you vote on the second recommendation? I don't think you did.
We did, but I just took it first instead of... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, so can we please take item 2 then, that subject to the preceding decision, members approve the publication of the consultation responses as set out in the appendices, and note the proposed alterations to the draft local plan as set out in the report. Proposed by Councillor Molson, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? It's unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Watt.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wonder if I could make a comment before publication. Could it be proofread a bit more concisely? Because there is a fair bit of repetition. There are at least 4 paragraphs in there which are identical. There's repetition within it. So, and there are some spelling mistakes as well.
Is that noted, Lisa?
Oh, sorry.
Chairman, there would be repetition in that particular report because it's actually standard comments to various representations of a similar nature. But obviously, if any member has spotted any typing mistakes, just forward them to me.
And also the responses are usually verbatim. So if there are spelling mistakes in what someone said, we don't correct those.
Thank you.
Just quickly,
Councillor Sims.
Proofreading. It's often a good idea if the people who wrote the thing don't do the proofreading, because it's muscle memory. You just know what's there and you don't see it. I know that from bitter experience.
Thank you. Now, we'd like to move on to item number 11, and hopefully we have our 151 officer joining us on the telephone. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
Thank you, we can. So this is our budget monitoring for 2018. Hand over to you, Russell.
Okay, thank you. Quick apologies, I was just going to today because of the weather, but quickly run through the report. This is the shorter budget report we bring between quarterly reports. It's to give you a brief update on assurance that spending is still being controlled and is being managed appropriately. The more extensive quarterly reports to give you a much fuller picture, and there's one due next month. But just referring back to this report to start with, it's the period to the end of August 2018. In terms of the total position for the council, currently showing an underspend of £46,000 we forecast at year end. This is quite a similar position to what was shown in the July report, albeit the July report wasn't taken by full council. I think it was circulated to all members, and this is a reduction on the position of the bid report in the fuller June quarter report, where we forecasted a 70,000 on the spend. So a slight reduction since that full first quarter report. But we're still working with senior managers to try and improve the narrative, and we're also spending a lot of time with senior managers trying to improve the coding, which is still an issue that we've got. And a lot of effort has been put in to try and get the second quarter figures more robust. Generally, the feedback from the meetings that we've had between finance and senior managers is that expenditure is going as planned, and where there are exceptions, managers are working on the issues and trying to mitigate any impact. A couple of the larger variances I've just drawn with attention to is that forecast 50,000 spent on the people services to deal with discretionary services. This is in line with previous levels of spend, so it's not a worry at the moment. Active City, probably the next largest variance with £31,000 underspend, and was mainly due to staff vacancies. I'll leave it with that, and whether there's any questions or comments from members in the meeting.
Thank you, Russell. I'd actually like to start with a few comments. Whilst I appreciate we've had a number of underspends, I am concerned that the democratic and corporate governance has overspent by 14,000 to date, and strategic development and finance 31,000. I realise we're only halfway through the year, but you know, I would hope that we have a sharp focus on those departments in the next 6 months, in the hope that we can claw back some of that overspend. I would also like to make the point on the waste and recycling that whilst I understand that we have Cresco now to deal with, and you know, we have curbside recycling hopefully underway, we should know what this is going to cost us. I don't accept the fact that these are basically not clear, and I would like the department concerned to do some more work on that, please. Do we have any other comments, please, members? Councillor Grottick.
Just a quick comment about Active City. I'd just like to commend the team at Active City, because they've tried very hard this summer to be innovative about new ways of encouraging people to use the facilities and increase the footfall. And I'd just like to say that's a very positive move forward. And otherwise, there are obviously, as noted in the report, various issues around the school academisation, which I know Russell is monitoring very carefully for us. So obviously, we've just got to watch this and see how it pans out. Thank you.
Councillor Molson.
Yeah, just a quick question on as far as the water resources concerned. I understand obviously that the desalination plant is very expensive to run. Is that going to have a significant impact on budgets this year?
Chairman, in terms of the desalination plant, it won't be very different from previous years. As you know, we have been trying to improve the capacity of the desalination plant because we have put in a new cable which was ending its near life. But at the moment, because of some of the upgrades to the pumps required as well, so at the moment the desalination plant actually isn't being used any more than it has done in the past, so those costs should be fairly neutralised.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I just wonder why I'm on about Park House again, why there's no reason why the service should again report a balanced budget position. Yeah. I think the word "not" has been left out. Yeah. And I also note, sorry?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it would be a good idea to try for the balanced budget.
Okay.
And I see that the spindly lobster is still with us from last council.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I just wanted to make the point, compare the position this year to the position last year. I think we can have a lot more faith in the figures we've got today than we did at the equivalent meeting last year. And I also think it's quite heartening that our Chair of Council just basically mentioned a couple of overspends, which are, obviously every overspend is an issue, but it's a lot better than we were looking at hundreds of thousands of pounds in previous years. So I just wanted to say that the direction of travel is good. Perhaps we're not there yet, but maybe we can see the destination.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. On previous occasions, when we've looked at the reason for some of the underspend, it's been related to staff vacancies. And I was just wondering if officers could give an indication whether those vacancies are decreasing, increasing, or staying the same as we sit at this point in time.
Shall I respond? Thank you for that question. We could continue to monitor clearly, very carefully, the vacancies and recruitment. Latterly, I think I could say we've been quite successful in attracting good people in some vacant positions. So there will be a little bit of shift happening over the next few months. We've been very successful.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to go through some of the commentary, please. Just regarding active silly, there's a line in there that the risk that income in this area reduced as a consequence of the school transferring to academy status. I was actually going to pick this up in the academy paper as well. I mean, it doesn't sound particularly advantageous to the community and council in the way it's written, just suggesting that maybe there should be some financial impacts of the academisation presented to us. Just moving on to environmental health, it actually just picks up on Councillor Williams's point around vacancy management. I mean, I feel slightly in the dark as to where we are in terms of vacancies, in terms of how many vacancies do we have at the moment, how does that impact on services, and how does it impact on our finances? Because I think we've identified from previous finance papers that it's actually quite significant in our either underspend or being on target. Just moving on to housing, sorry, I underlined around transfer of housing assets to the Multi-Academy Trust. That's actually going to be picked up in the Academy paper. And lastly, on the natural resources and assets, it says there's some pressures around the rental units of the PEC. This isn't the first time we've heard it, and I'd like to see some information coming to us, please, about the state of the PEC, where we are in terms of that, in terms of income, expenditure, profit and loss, and vacancies in the units there, please.
Okay, I'll try and make some comments over to those from Councillor Smith, and if any of the officers there want to chip in. Active city, yes, we've identified obviously there is a work still ongoing that the arrangement between the council and the school for the use of the sports or leisure facilities. Negotiations are still ongoing. The idea is to try and secure as close as possible to the existing level of income. But obviously, we are raising an issue that the end result may have an impact if we can't secure the same level of income as we've received in recent times. But I know the Chief Executive was well aware of the situation and was monitoring it. The vacancy management situation, I'll leave that to the Chief Executive if he wants to do a full report on one of the vacancies, but certainly from a financial perspective, the quarterly report, which we are developing, the first one at the end of the June position, at the end of September, we anticipate on our calendar that will show more detail on the spend, will show the level of spend against budgets on key areas such as staffing, so we should be able to pick up what the level of under or overspend is against the staffing budgets, which will have obviously direct correlation between the two management. The natural resources, yes, we're aware obviously of these issues. We can have a look on with the senior manager in that area, see if we can bring back slightly more detailed information on the future meetings and senior managers there on site.
Chairman, we could bring back a more detailed paper. We are looking also at the options going forward in terms of the management of the PEC as well. So there will actually be a paper coming before members, certainly in the near future.
Thank you. Can I just press when that paper will be, please, on the PEC? By what date?
Chairman, I couldn't say at this stage. I mean, I think that depends in terms of some of the options analysis we're actually looking at in terms of the future of the PEC. So that might be a little bit longer. And what I'd have to do is actually speak to one of my senior officers in terms of what financial information actually is available in terms of costs of the PEC and also the income streams coming in at the PEC.
Yeah, thank you. If that could come to us, say, before December, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Chairman, yeah, can I just go down a slightly morbid route? Cemeteries are on there. And I was down at Old Town Cemetery the other day, the graveyard, and it's pretty clear it's filling up fast. And I was just wondering, I'm not sure about other islands, is there a contingency for identifying adjacent land as and when required?
Chairman, we have been in discussions actually with the Duchy of Cornwall because, yeah, you're absolutely right. We do need to actually extend the cemetery. And as part of that extension, it does obviously need quite a lot of ground preparation because obviously when you are digging graves, you need to make sure that there aren't big boulders in its place because obviously once you actually do start digging graves, it's really important that they're all kind of aligned. So yeah, there is work to be done.
Thank you. Well, Russell, thank you very much for that item. The recommendation is that members note the budget monitoring report as at the 31st of August 2018. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconder, Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 12. The financial regulations update, your page 207, and we are in your hands again, Russell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, since I mentioned in previous reports and items to full council that local spending is beginning to what we may have and living within our means. The overall control requirement still has many weaknesses, and I think financial regulations is probably a key one. For example, when it's different financial regulations and on the council internet. All that update with references to the old committee structure and to officers from previous structures. Also, probably quite old in the fact that councils in the modern era need to be moved on, need to refer to the modern world we live in. I would certainly we probably need to do a full rewrite of the financial regulations, and we can do this on the platform of the council, but we're also rewriting the financial regulations. And as we use that systems, many of our systems and processes, we can see best practices to follow they do. But in the interim, these financial regulations are published. Probably not very clear or transparent, as I say, they refer to structures and governments from the previous era. So probably need to put some interim financial regulations in to correct that before we do a full rewrite. Certainly, when we do a full rewrite, we will consult with members during that process to get their feedback. But for this process, we'll restrict full council. Now, I'm not quite sure how you play to check, but I would suggest there's probably been quite a lot of correspondence on this over the last few days with questions from Councillor Smith, which I believe the responses have been copied to all members of council. So I think I would suggest that perhaps the latest set of comments that Councillor Smith made last night, that was go through those as a starting point, and then we'll take from there with any further questions. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine, Russell. I think there's been a number of questions from members which Councillor Smith has put forward to you. And I don't think we need to go through all of them, but any items there which need further debate, then obviously we're very happy to take. And if you'd like to comment on any of those first, Russell, that is fine.
Okay, well, I've got a couple of quick Councillor Smith raised last night. The first one is on the second page of what was sent out last night, where Mr. says the supervisory regulation they will be put in place for a few months, so it's important to make some minor changes to make it more appropriate. Yeah, happy to adopt minor changes where we need to, just not going to rewrite them from scratch at the moment. So there are minor changes which I would propose we go through. Happy to adopt those if they're appropriate. Next comment is on the Oxford Development 2.3. This last comment is we would like to amend the text to say it shall come to death. I have no problems with that going in. I don't know whether the launching officer has, but we can make that small change unless Matt has an issue with that.
No, so from my perspective, it's something that can be done, but it takes away from discretion. It's good practice to be so no harm.
Okay, happy with that. Next one, 3.1, the timetabling. I've defined the section of which I recall to council proposal tabling good time for the budget setting process. Again, we don't have a problem with that. We make that amendment. 5.4, rezoning orders have that this is to do with the coroner being the vice chair. Smith was adding a third in line inside of the member for the place or the scrutiny chair. We want to add third person if we don't have an issue. Again, I'll refer slightly to the monitoring officer here. I probably feel that the scrutiny chair may be slightly conflicted in making being part of the decision-making process in an urgent position. I don't know whether Matt's got points on that.
So I think I tend to agree with you, Russell, that given the responsibilities of scrutiny, it won't be scrutiny fair. But is that a matter of picking which other members you want in that order priority if we're able to make a decision, bearing in mind that they're consultees rather than decision making?
Well, I'm comfortable if the rest of the members say it's the lead member of the place, or something to suggest a different one, but I certainly feel that we should probably avoid the scrutiny chair because of the issue that there is conflict there, or potential conflict. So I'll leave that to members to make that point in the mayor. If we go through the rest, 8, who actually appoints the internal auditors, section 151 chief financial officer will appoint the auditors, but I will also say I will advise members what any changes made to the arrangements. So it will just be done without them being aware. It will be consulted prior to any change to internal auditors because it is obviously quite an important task to control environments. Next one, about the level of payments and Councillor Smith's comments about the a single payment and just one person authorising it, we should have 2. Perhaps that wasn't quite clear in the initial response. There's always 2 officers or more involved in the process of raising orders and authorising orders and authorising payments. This was what we're referring to here is that payments for the significant nature, the final sign-off, one of those sign-offs must be a very senior manager, either the chief executive or final officer. Doesn't correlate with the fact we will have separation of duties and the number of officers involved in the process, so it doesn't matter of that senior manager making a spending decision or processing something by themselves with no input from anybody else. So the normal control requirements for separation of duties will exist. It just means that one of the people involved in that must be a senior officer as to the level set out in the financial regulations. Part about the high level of authorisation of senior officers, senior managers at £100,000, senior officers 50,000. This came back from work that came from looking at the detailed scheme delegation we put in the new finance system. It was appealing from the senior managers to make council flow and make payments that would be made on time, that they need to delegate some authority down to senior officers. It's not unusual to have these reference at senior officer decisions, but again, if members feel this is a serious issue, then the chief executive, I'm sure, will make comments about it. The 70-day target of paying invoices, making it more clear and transparent. This would really aim at officers clearing that paperwork as quickly as possible so we can meet the 30-day target. If we want to put something more transparent in there, it should be less than 30 days because obviously there's the financial process, the payments, and what we're saying here is officers need to really clear invoices as soon as they get started. Slight change in the processes where that really wants to be needed because processes are changing the invoices that we expect but still need to be there to ensure officers are aware that they have to do invoices as quickly as possible. So we just make some slight tweaks to that, but it won't be 30 days because obviously we need to allow time for the finance process to payment. Next one is okay. Yes, just said, can we put something more in the financial regs? Happy to expand it slightly. What we will do, the practice we usually is that financial regs will be high level, is a credit management policy which probably is missing at the moment, so we will just expand financial regs slightly as suggested to cancel that short for the moment. Next one is on the vice chair position again. There's no problem with report on insurance. Yeah, no problem that if members feel that they need update on insurance on a regular on a normal basis, we'll find a way of putting that into the key reports, either quarterly reports or separate report. Yeah, we need to update, as I say, we can pick up some of these now. The bigger one is a good example where no mention of online channels or anything, so we can just put those in for the moment, make the financials more complete. I think that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
Other things being equal, I would just propose that we accept them as they are, because the important thing is these are interim financial regulations and we will get a full binding long-term set at some point, and I don't have any particular issues with them as they are, and certainly Russell's response, Ashman's response to Jonathan's was more than satisfactory from my perspective. So I'm sure other members have some questions and potential niggles with them, but I'm happy with them as they are, given that they're interim, and I'm sure we'll have a workshop before we put the full-blown permanent job in.
Councillor Mumford.
Yes, could I ask the 151 officer, the appointment of the internal auditors, I I gather at the moment that is your responsibility?
Yes, it's my responsibility to ensure we have put in place a system of internal audit. That can be either in-house or through given the contractual relationship with third party. The responsibilities that's
I would like to see that any appointment of internal auditors should come to full council before it's to be ratified by full council.
Get the appropriate internal audit must set the so that's the legal responsibility to ensure financial control environment is sound. So just a ratification if there's a problem with final ratification and that's all. But to whether the morning officer and that has any views on that as well.
Yes, so I think what you would be doing is bringing it to council for endorsement of the appointment before you actually make your decision. Because as you say, it's your responsibility. And if members aren't prepared to endorse what you're proposing, which is probably multiple days, and a proper process, then there's a decision you need to make, which may not sit comfortably with members, but I would have thought that every time there'll be a meeting of minds on it. So let's bring it for endorsement, but not ratification.
Would there be any consultation with the lead member for finance or the chairman of scrutiny?
I think almost certainly any process in changing or reappointing or extending contracts with will be consulted both lead member, finance and the chair of scrutiny and to just good practice.
Can we have that written in, please, to this? 8.1.
As set out, you just mentioned
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said then.
Having a problem making a slight change to what's set there, what plan to do is bring the endorsement of part of that would be that there would be a consultation of any change or very change with both the lead member of finance and the chair of scrutiny as a consultation.
Thank you.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd agree with mostly what Steve said, that we accept these regulations, maybe with that change to paragraph 8.1, but also with a timetable for when this is going to be reviewed and when the new regulations will be in place.
Councillor Molson.
Yeah, I was going to say what Councillor Marcus did then, with a timetable on the detailed review, and with that, I would second Steve Sims's proposal.
I didn't propose it, but I'll second your proposal if you wish to make it.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to 10.6, I've had comments from quite a few colleagues that they find these numbers quite large, and I think part of that is obviously due to the quite reasonable wish to be very proactive and careful with our finances. Could you just confirm, please, Russell, that any of these large amounts would be subject, obviously you yourself have hold the responsibility in the main. Would you just clarify that, for example, at item 2, 10.6, that the Chief Executive would obviously be discussing with you any wish to have this discretionary limit applied in any way, shape or form? I mean, it's a collegiate responsibility, right? But I would just like to feel that for the benefit and reassurance of members that you yourself are firmly in the driving seat over any amount to be progressed that comes within these parameters.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yeah.
I think there seems to be a bit of confusion amongst members what financial regulations are and what delegated scheme of delegation is. Financial regulations are an operational tool, if you like, are the regulations how we manage or implement the finances. So the amounts quoted in here are not the amounts for which there is delegated authority to make the spend. The financial regulations merely allow to authorize for a payment to be made that has previously been agreed and agreed. So for instance, the amount has to be so high because we do have some high bills. Examples are payroll. Yeah? Somebody needs to authorize to actually make the payment for the payroll. That is the reason why those figures are in place. It's to allow the organization not to grind to a halt for very, very basic transactions that need to be made. Could you comment on that, Russell?
Yeah, I think you're right there, the fact that the delegation, scheme delegation delegates look at the set budget and delivery of the budget and delivery of any approved capital programme is then delegated to yourself as chief executive. You then delegate that further to see appropriate to make good operational management decisions for the council. These levels are put in because there are large bills. What we're saying here is for the large bills, that somebody very senior at the very top of the organisation should be authorising these, and that will split the money between chief executive or myself as an officer. And if you look at these sums, we have a payment that would breach those. Who do we take that? Who then has to authorise those payments? Considering usually the payments are contractually bound to make the payment because we've already received the goods or services that they relate to. So it is purely an operational issue rather than a spending decision. Spending decisions are made and then they set the budget and set the capital programme.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I was very pleased the Chief Executive made that point. It's blindingly obvious, but it never occurred to me, and that is quite reassuring. And I cannot imagine a situation, any situation, in which the Chief Executive would make an extraordinary payment of £250,000 without consulting members. It's just not going to happen. However, outside of just normal operations. And thank you for that clarification. That was extremely useful.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Russell, for all the explanations. So just to clarify on point 5.4 and also 16.3 regarding the kind of third in line, are we going to change that to lead member for place? Or question for members, I guess. Are they happy to endorse that? Yep.
Are you making a proposition on that?
I'll make a proposal for that, yeah, because clearly it doesn't work at the moment.
Right. Is there a seconder that the third consultee should be the lead member for place? Dan Marcus, Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? Any against? Right, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarification on your answers to 11.3, I just feel, yeah, if I take your point about the 30-day payment thing, I think it's about making clear the aims that we are aiming to pay our bills, as soon as possible. And I think it'd be useful just to change that wording to make that clear. Maybe just delegate that to the 151 officer.
Thank you. Just one comment I'd like to make from the chair, and that is that I understand members' concerns about the various amounts that have been raised in this interim paper. However, as has been pointed out clearly, these are already figures that have been agreed. We will have agreed these in the budget. But one thing I do want to add is that the budget is broken down clearly so that when we are agreeing the budget, we can see clearly the items that are underneath these big figures in case we wish to question them. If you could please take that on board, Russell.
Yes, we will do that. In the main, large items probably be related to council programme, to be honest, so that's what we
Yeah. Yeah, but we still need to know the details so that when we are agreeing the budget, we are absolutely clear what we're voting on. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I would like to finally propose that the recommendation, I think Jonathan's proposition has already gone through, but with the amendments that Councillor Mumford suggested regarding consultation internal audit.
Yeah,
I can't remember what word it was.
I'm clear that we've got the proposal from you, Councillor Sims, with the proviso that we have a timetable, as mentioned by Councillor Marcus and Councillor Molson, and Councillor Mumford's point that what was your point again?
That the appointment of the internal auditors,
yes,
in consultation with the lead member for finance, chairman of scrutiny.
Yeah. So we've got those two providers. So
and to be, I think that the monitoring officer wasn't particularly keen on the word ratifying, so I can't remember what he said now. Endorsed.
Yeah.
But by full council.
Thank you. So we've got that. And was it you that seconded that, Councillor Molson? Thank you. So seconded by Councillor Molson. All those in favour, please. That members approve the updated interim financial regulations pending a more detailed review and with those two provisos. So all those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you for all your work, Russell, on that. I know there's been a lot of questions. We appreciate your input. I just would like to say, though, whilst you're here with us on the telephone, it's not terribly easy to hear you, and I would appreciate it if our officers from Cornwall can try and make it to our meetings. I know it's difficult sometimes, but when we've got weather warnings and so on, it may be the thing to do to come the day before, please. But thank you very much for your response to all this.
May I just make a very, very short technical point? Matt has the headphones and the mic on. Russell. I'm seeing the surname. Yeah, Russell doesn't, and Matt is much clearer. It may well be worth bearing in mind in the future.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Councillor Sims. Thank you. I noticed that too. Thank you. Right, we are going to move item 14 into part 1. That's not going to be a part 2 report now. I'd like to invite Keith to... Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Item 13 is the pay policy statement 2018-2019, report of the Office of Policy and Scrutiny.
No, it's me. It's in front of you members is the pay policy statement for 18-19. This is a paper that will come on an annual basis to members. Usually the paper is taken in May, June sometime. Apologies for the delay. The delay is due to the fact that this year the discussion between the employers and the union have taken a long time to complete and were only completed very recently, hence the delay in this paper. So the paper is identical to what it was in previous years, with 4 exceptions, or 4 changes have been made to the pay policy. First one is that the pay scales have been amended to reflect the discussions between employers and the unions, and that have been agreed under the JNC arrangements. Secondly, the mileage rates have been amended to be in line with HMRC revised mileage rates. Thirdly, we have included a sleeping duty for employees that are required to sleep on premises. And again, this has been included in line with the Green Book terms and conditions, which all our employees are on. And finally, we have made a reference to a recently designed policy around employer discretion, which is required for the local government pension scheme and has been put up to date. So those are the 4 amendments that have been made in the pay policy, and the pay policy is in front of you for approval.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the pay policy, please? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, on the introductory report, the second bullet point down in point refine use of variable pay, but it's made me less clear about it. I can't see any reference to variable pay in the meat of the report. So I was just wondering what the clarity was about variable pay, what it is.
Well, there's 2 bits, and it has to do, of course, with people that have call it 0-hour contracts, yeah, so casual work. And so we had to clarify what it means in terms of their legal employment status. And that has been clarified in the paper. So we've clarified not so much the policy, but clarified the contracts. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to page 7 on the pay multiples. It's really just an observation, really, that I just had a quick look back to 2015-16, and the pay multiple between the highest and the median pay was 4.77. This is, it's now gone up to 5.07. It's just a comment that maybe we should be looking to become a more kind of equal pay organisation, and that maybe that figure should be aiming to be going down over time.
Just comment on that. The range is well within the 20, which is kind of seen as the maximum. Comparing to other local authorities, similar, both rural and city local authorities, they tend to hover around the 7.5 and 8.99. So in that sense, the Council of the Isles of Scilly is extremely well positioned, if you like, in the league table of pay multiples.
It's encouraging to hear. Nonetheless, the trend has increased slightly, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. That would be my comment. I just wanted to also pick up, please, on the amounts. Sorry, page 15, subsistence overnight accommodation expenses. I was surprised to see the amounts for staying in B&Bs and hotels being £95 outside of London, £150 in London. That does seem extremely high to me, and I would suggest that maybe those amounts are too high for expenses.
I think clearly these are not target amounts, they are maximum amounts.
Clearly not, clearly. But
and these were set by full council, I think 2 years ago, having experienced great difficulties in delivering within the set range.
Clearly not targets, but nonetheless, it raises the ceiling to what is possible in terms of when you're booking. I would suggest that the public's view would be that this is a very high figure and probably should be amended downwards.
Thank you, Councillor Legg.
I would actually disagree. I think 95 and 150 in London is actually reasonable. Having recently tried to find accommodation, I think those figures are appropriate.
And the alternative, if you can't find it, is to take a tent with you. I think that's just the problem.
I can assure members that the officers having to travel and work in London are always exceedingly careful in booking accommodation and find the most suitable and most cheap way of doing this. We're not going for a target, it's right.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
Yes, just one point on the same page. Cars and vans of 45p per mile outside London and only 25p in London. Why is that?
No.
Have I read this wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, first, no.
No, it's for the first 10,000 business miles. This is purely copying the advice or the instructions given by HMRC around tax. So, in terms of reimbursing private car mileage use, for the first 10,000 miles, we provide a 45p per mile.
Right. Over 10,000 miles.
If it's over 10,000, it will go down to 25p a mile. And this is in line with...
Beg your pardon, I didn't read it properly.
I have to say, this is kind of theoretical. There are very, very few people ever using private cars.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I would support Councillor Legg's comments. I think members would be encouraging officers to find the best value accommodation, but I'd hate to see staff accommodated in some dirty, dingy hovel. It'd be for expense, for a sort of cost of 25 quid less or something like that. So members and staff's safety, I think, has to be built into some of the costs which have been paid for accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Just quickly to say that there are areas of London that may be cheaper, but areas of London where I would not like to think that we leave our officers to stay overnight on their own.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation that members approve the pay policy statement 2018-19 following the revised national joint council rates effective from the 1st of April 2018. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Molson, seconded. Councillor Barclay. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, now we move on to the item that was in part 2, item 14, now in part 1, the academisation and the council's relationship with the education sector. Your page 259. Report of the Senior Officer of Children's Services. And thank you, Keith, for joining the table as well.
Okay, Keith has written a very strong paper here. I just wanted to talk very broadly first and then actually open the floor for questions. I'm going to cover 4 areas. What the current role of the local authority is in education while the school continues to be local authority maintained, the process of conversion, the impact of the proposed MAT on school improvement to date, and then what next. So in terms of those members who haven't been with the local authority for a long time, and for those of you who have been, I'm sorry, and it sounds like we're going back to basics, local authorities do not run schools. So we do not appoint staff, we do not set the curriculum, we do not get involved in specific issues. All we do is monitor results, and based on evidence, we will make recommendations to schools, support and advise and give guidance for improvement. It is up to governing bodies and their leadership teams whether or not they listen to that advice. If those concerns continue not to be listened to, Ofsted come in, and Ofsted may decide that a school is inadequate. At that point, a local authority does have greater powers of intervention, which is what we exercised when we appointed an interim executive board prior to conversion. The process of conversion to a multi-academy trust is a compulsory process, and it is not subject to local scrutiny. Members may have their own views on that, but those need to be taken up with the MP and with government. This current administration and previous administrations do believe that multi-academy trusts are the way forward for education in this country. And they are systematically moving schools into those arrangements and out of local authority arrangements. The MAT that was selected by the Regional Schools Commissioner, and that choice is made by the Regional Schools Commissioner, to whom authority is delegated by the Secretary of State. The impact of that MAT has been good and significant. We have had 2 monitoring visits by a team that we commissioned to go into school, which say the school is vastly better. We had a Section 8 visit last November from Ofsted, which said the school is going in the right direction, and another one about 10 days ago. The report's not out, but I can tell you that they believe that this MAT is the way forward for the school. The MATs who are currently proposed do not have to become our MATs. They are still deciding themselves, and we're working through the process of conversion, whether they want to take on this partnership. It's the local authority's position, well, it certainly has been mine while I've been senior manager, that our school will only thrive in partnership with another school. And that's where you'll get the sustainability, the resilience, the continuing professional development that's required. Children are doing better in our school now. Their results are better at every single stage. I think there needs to be acceleration around Key Stage 2, but at every single stage, our children are now doing better, both in terms of attainment and progress. What next is that the local authority has a broad range of education duties which have nothing to do with the Five Island School, really. It's about special educational needs, about homeschool transport, it's about safeguarding in its broadest sense. So there's a huge range of educational duties that we will retain. We will continue to get a grant from DFE to support those duties. That's already been negotiated. It just means that the money that used to come in for school will go directly to them. You saw earlier in papers that there are some issues around income in other areas of council services. Don't link those necessarily to the conversion process. So, for example, the conversations about the cost of school usage of the sports hall has been a conversation going on with school leadership for 5-6 years. That's just simply to do with the normal negotiations between schools that use kind of central resources in a local authority area, to say, can we review the costs, fees and charges and so on. Obviously, it's come more to light at the moment because we are also going through the legal process of transferring all documentation, but it's not to do with conversion. The issues around housing, income, that again, in a conversion process, anything without which a school could not normally operate needs to go to the school, and that is the law. And in our unique environment, that will also include some aspects of housing, because without dedicated teacher housing, the resources become unsustainable. And actually, the movement to the MAT actually protects those resources for education into the future. I'm sure you've got lots of questions, but my strong recommendation is that we do everything we can to support the MAT partnership flourishing. They're doing a really good job for our children. They're doing so currently at significant risk. And I'd like you to lament with me how long this process has taken. It's meant to be 6 months. It should have been finished by June 2017. The fact we're sat here in November 2018 is really tricky. We'd like to kind of draw a line under this and now move to the future.
Thank you. Keith, would you like to comment on the report?
I'm happy to welcome any questions that you might have along here. I've identified the key processes that we're legally bound to follow, and the processes linked to some of the complexities of the academisation process linked to multiple landlords, diocese, duchy, Tresco estate, local authority, all involved in the process. It has been long-winded, and there has been some interesting negotiation between the local authority and the MAT over various issues that are finally coming to a settlement that we can see the end is in sight. But I'll take the questions gladly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
First of all, I'd like to thank Keith and Aisling for a very good report. But I do have some questions. First of all, I would agree that as councillors, we need to have a working relationship with the IEB and the Academy, and I think it would be quite a good thing to set up a meeting perhaps with the IEB or with the MAT so councillors could have an informal chat sometime.
Okay.
Or is that not?
Well, we had one on the 19th of July.
You had one on the 19th of July?
Yeah, for members. There was a Jackie Eason and Sarah Davey and Andy Harvey all came to meet you. You may have been away.
Yeah.
We have had informal meetings.
There's just a few questions I'd like to ask. The monitoring of standards and escalation of any concerns to the Regional Schools Commission. So if, and hopefully when we come out of being inadequate, special measures, I believe Ofsted probably wouldn't do a visit for maybe 2 or 3 years. But if we felt as councillors that the standards were dropping, would we have the authority to call in Ofsted, or would we have to, do we go to the Regional Schools Commissioner?
So what happens is that usually every February, we've brought a paper to members where we use all the moderated data from the summer's results, because it's not actually accurate till that point. We bring a paper to you and we highlight how it's going, because what we're meant to be doing is monitoring the performance of schools in our area. We've just got one. So we'll look at that. If we have concerns, we'll write to the Regional Schools Commissioner and probably also to the chairman of the MAT, exactly as we did when we did the warning letter before. We wouldn't go to Ofsted. We might whistleblow to Ofsted if we had concerns around safeguarding, but we wouldn't go directly to Ofsted. But Ofsted themselves monitor the results of schools in their areas. Because the schools in special measures, it will get a Section 5 inspection at some point over the next 6 months to a year, which is what will decide whether or not they're still in special measures.
The other question is, have you any idea when the Ofsted report will be made public?
It will go to school. I don't know if does the Section 8 go public? Yeah, it's not an inspection, so I'm not sure if it is public, but I think maybe it can be shared. But 2 or 3 weeks. Ofsted have only just been here.
Thank you. Councillor Molson, no. Councillor Sims.
Really point of information, there is a Facebook page, I can't remember what it is, Parents of Private Island School, which does actually make regular updates. And is it Jackie Eastman?
There's a variety of fora in which the school engages with parents, and it's the school, not the local authority. So there is a Five Islands page, and actually all parents' meetings and IEB meetings are live streamed through Facebook. So if you're an off-islander or you're cooking the children's tea, you can still participate. There are also some informal groups. They're always working on communication, and I think one of the conversations recently with elected members of the off-islands was to put a fixed thing in the diary to come around every term and meet parents on off-islands, because every single island has a different flavour and a different set of concerns.
I was just saying it's a very good source of information about the school, and there was a letter that the lady sent, which was put up there, which I think was hinted that the Ofsted was broadly favourable, etc. So that, there's things that perhaps as a council we can't really discuss, but they can do. They seem to be able to have a little bit more liberty to do it, and it's a very, very good source of information about the school.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I was going to ask about paragraph 19. It says that financial operations implications will need to fully assessed and approved. Does that mean by council, or what's the definition of that?
So this report was written in a land before we came to a different understanding with the MAT around operational use of the sports hall. So we were in a position at one stage of looking at having a sublease within the sports hall, which would require significant financial modelling and programme about separating out that element of the wellbeing centre. Since this report was written, the MAT have chosen to choose another model about a pay-as-you-go model for access to the sports hall instead, so that this paragraph is a little bit defunct.
Okay. And also 23, the end of paragraph 23, you're talking about the cost of the IEB in that one, and the cost of the IEB are quite high, I understand. Hopefully those costs will stop pretty soon. What's the plan? That's a big chunk of money. What's going to happen to that money?
So we'll come back to members. We'll come back to members about how that money, that's all about budget setting for the future. So we've got a kick-off meeting with senior management team next week, which is talking about budget pressures for next year, but also where there might be budget changes, and that's going to be one of them. So that will come back into the mix about how we set the budget for 18-19. 19-20, God, really? Space it.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I would endorse Councillor Mumford's comments about having some sort of networking with the IEB, if only to hear how aspirational they are in terms of some of their vision, some of what they're trying to achieve, what they're working towards. And I think it would reassure members to hear that plans are so concise and so clear about where they want to take the education and learning for children on Scilly. And also, I'd encourage perhaps the Chief Exec to think about the Academy having a seat on Island Futures as well. As an autonomous body, they've obviously got a huge amount of influence in the direction of the island. So again, it's how we strategically use their skills going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, endorse Councillor Mumford's comments on this. It's been a very useful and well-written paper. Thank you. Just a question on paragraph 9 and the trustees to the new MAT. Encouraging to hear that the current IEB will be on the new board. Just questioning how many other trustees will there be?
Yeah, the LEAP Board of Trustees is 12 members, which will comprise primarily those linked with Mount Spade, but also sort of feeder school, the other schools joining in from the Penwith area and the diocese, and 3 members from the Isles of Scilly.
Okay, so it's a fair representation.
Yeah.
And then there's the local bit as well, which is now called the local
FIAC.
FIAC.
Fine Violence Accountable Body.
Yeah.
Or
so there
board.
will be, so there's some government, shadow government being developed in order to support sustainable government in the future. They will probably have to go through appointment again, but there will be when they did step forward, it was ensured that
Good representation of off-island parents, safeguarding input and so on. So that there will still be that local flavour, then feed up to the MAT trustee board.
Okay, thank you. Just a point raised about meetings with parents. In fact, the IEB came up to St Martin's to meet parents on Friday, which is very encouraging, and so very much welcome that. And they're showing a real desire to come up on a regular basis. That feels like a really good development. I just wanted to pick up on the point on the delays in paragraph 10. I mean, we all know it's been delayed and it's very frustrating. I just sort of wanted to clarify. It seems to me it's often suggested that the delays are due to silly issues. It's complicated, it's a group of islands, it's an unusual setup. Is that really the case, or is it also sort of a combination of other things happening on
There's
mainland
2
issues?
factors as indicated. So one is the complexity of the process, and 2 is there was a change in the proposed MATs, because as you remember at the beginning, it was Mounts Bay in conjunction with Trevithick as venture MAT, and a year in, it changed. So actually we'd done quite a lot of the legal paperwork already, which had to be started again, and that has been unfortunate. But that's the thing to remember, is while this is all quite grueling for us as officers, actually we've always worked as if the MAT is in place. So the MAT is investing heavily in school improvement, as is the local authority. So we've not slowed anything down in order to make education better day to day. So we've progressed as if it's happened. But yes, there was that change, and that's the Regional Schools Commissioner's issue, that the MAT changed rounds halfway through, and it has been more complicated than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, thank you. And just to sort of reiterate your point about we as members should support the MAT flourishing. I mean, I think everyone will be in agreement with that, absolutely. Just lastly, just to pick up on finances, one question around, does the finalisation of the asset transfers you outlined in paragraph 18, does that determine the academisation date? I.e., does that all have to be completed to ensure?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And will there be a paper coming to us on the financial and social impacts of these asset transfers? Because I feel that's quite an important element to this. Whether we have control of this or not, it seems to be all these elements have quite significant impacts on the local authority.
I'm not clear about what you mean.
Well, so if you look at all the items in paragraph 18, all of those are being, a lot of those are assets of the council and being transferred to the MAT. They will all of those transfers will have impacts on the local authority and the community. Can we see a paper on those impacts, financial and social?
I don't see that they do have an impact. They remain within on the islands for the purposes of the education of children, which is their current purpose. So the purpose does not change. Actually, actual ownership of various bits, we only actually own Mundersley. And this,
yeah, but we've just seen in the budget papers that we've actually seeing there will be impacts from the sports hall, there'll be impacts from rental incomes that will impact our finances. So surely we need to see that.
I think, well, I mean, it's a compulsory process. So I
Sure.
don't know. So yeah, I can say this is, it will, you know, we can ask the service managers what impact that might have, but that's, I don't know what we do other than you mitigate it through budget management.
Not necessarily can, but in terms of transparency, I think it's quite important.
I think it comes under exactly everything else we do, which is budget pressures moving forward and what is going to be different in 18-19. So we know we'll have less income from various aspects and more income because we won't be paying for an IB and all the other bits and pieces that the other senior managers will have. It simply is a change and a fluctuation on income, which is what you might expect to see.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you. Yeah, I accept what Jonathan Smith is saying, Councillor Smith is saying, which there are things like, for example, we should lose some income from business rates, for example, or from the rates of particular buildings. But I'd just like to say the most important thing for this authority is to get a robust and achieving educational system, and we just have to deal with the cards that are dealt us in other respects, I think. Maybe a bit simplistic, but, you know, let's focus on the positive.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Well, obviously there will be some financial impacts, but I would imagine the social impacts, if it's done properly, shouldn't make any real difference at all. It will just go through, and on that basis, people won't notice a substantive difference.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, my understanding is that £80,000 has been secured for Mundersley. Is that correct? And could you just give a bit more information on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's because of the way MATs are set up, they can access improvement funding, capital funding through the department in a way that local authorities can't. So they managed to get £80,000 to do at Mundersley. So they've got a whole kind of capital programme of work. So one of the things is, yes, okay, we may lose on income from Mundersley flats, but we no longer have the backlog maintenance work and ongoing maintenance of Mundersley building that will pass over. So it is kind of ebb and flow. And obviously, because it's also, the diocese are heavily involved here, there is huge legislation surrounding any property that's owned by the diocese in terms of disposal. So this process does really protect things for longer than the life of this council.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Keith and Aisling for the paper. I'd like to thank Matt and Russell for joining us by link. And at 11:38, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you.
I nearly made it only 2 hours.